the game grows, the players grow with it.
So there's no politics in AFL?
We support the illicit drug policy as long as it is about identifying players that are having problems with illicit drugs and helping them.
Length of games?
Yep.
Length of season?
The players now get a 31.7% share of the game's revenue.
I think there's a danger of losing that element, which is like highly unique to the AFL. Opening round, has that got a future or not? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are here in our Melbourne studio. Excited with this one. Paul Marsh, CEO of the AFLPA, is with me today. Paul, how are you?
Good, Schoey. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, mate. I'm really looking forward to having this chat. I think it's going to be a little bit different to our normal chats. Usually we're talking about taking hangers, big spoils, kicking goals. It's probably a bit more of a state of the game and where the players sit and all of that. So I'm looking forward to it. At the start of the season, we're doing this, 2025. Yep. But I am going to ask you the same question we ask every guest, Paul, and that is your greatest sporting achievement thanks to TABtouch this year, and of course the podcast powered by Paywise in 2025. We want to know your greatest sporting achievement. Now, usually I put the caveat for sports, players, they can't use their selected sport. It's got to be, something outside of the norm. But I'll let you just take your greatest sporting achievement. I know you're a keen golfer.
I am.
I don't know if there's something there, or if you want to go to something more left field. We had Sean Manus on here telling us that he was West Australian state pigeon training champion. So you can go very wide with it if you want. Greatest sporting achievement, Paul Marsh.
Oh, geez. Could be a toss-up between the 6 weeks in a row that I fell off the Pilates reformer. I don't think many people have done that.
That's good.
Or if I go back to my golf, probably my claim to fame is I've had 3 holes in one, but 2 of them have been on par 4s. I don't reckon many people have done that.
Is that right?
So that might be it.
So you can play?
Well, I was a better player when I was a bit younger, but I'm still hanging around sort of 3 or 4 handicaps. So, yeah, I'm crafty. Let's go with that.
So you do it once. Some would say it's like do it twice. Oh, you're pretty good. 3 times. I mean, talk us through the best of it. Like what?
Well, one of my par 4s, actually, I play at in Melbourne is Victoria Golf Club, and the first hole was a short par 4, but I actually hit a driver and flew it into the hole and it stayed in there. So an albatross on the first at Victoria. Not many people have done that as a slam dunk.
Do you celebrate or are you walking away as if that's normal behaviour?
Oh, I'm pretty calm, but no, there's a bit of fist pumping going on. Don't worry about that. Can you imagine it?
You just put the cue back in the rack like, see you later, boys. That's the next hole.
Let's get the next hole.
Good, mate. Love it. I want to talk a little bit about you growing up and your journey and your childhood, and then we'll speak about where you've got to. But what's life like growing up for you, mate? Where do you grow up? I know you're a West Australian.
I'm West Australian, yeah. So I grew up in Perth. Lived in Perth till I was 20. As I think you're aware, my old man played cricket for Australia. So a lot of our early days was travelling around with him. Did a lot of that particularly around Australia, but got to England one year to watch him play the Ashes. So sport was 2 brothers, and we played a heap of cricket and footy and golf and whatever we could get our hands on, really. So a lot of that. School, went to Christchurch Grammar School, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So that was it was a good upbringing in Perth, great weather, and obviously not much of a beach body, so I didn't get down there too often. But no, it was like loved growing up there. Still got lots of great mates in Perth, but moved to Adelaide when I was 20. Mum and Dad moved there, and I followed them over, and then lived in Adelaide for 10 years. And then the job came up for me in cricket with the Australian Cricketers Association, and moved to Melbourne when I was about 30. And I won't tell you how old I am now, but I've been here for a long time.
That's good. I'm head coach of Aquinas this year, so I know exactly who Christchurch is.
Okay. Well, Christchurch were never very good at sport, so I'm sure you mark that one down as a win.
Like any head coach, every team we're playing this year, there's a big competition. We'll beat them. So your time growing up then, and your old man playing for Australia, do you spend time, in the rooms? Do you have memories of being around some, superstars that I would look at as superstars? Do you just look at it as dad's mates, or? Yeah,
pretty much. I mean, we spent a heap of time, so we'd go down to a game at the Wacker with Dad, and we'd stay there all day, and me and my brother Dan would typically try to find a match with some other kids somewhere at the ground, and then we'd go in and we'd try to get him to throw us soft drinks and food during the day, and then, we'd end up going home with him. So, we grew up with, when he played for WA with the likes of Dennis Silly and Bruce Laird, and there was a whole heap of them at the time that, ended up playing for Australia, and we were great mates with them and their families. And then when he played for Australia, the Chappell brothers and Jeff Thompson and all those sort of household names from the 70s and 80s, they were just part of our lives. So we were very lucky. It was, there were times when, Dad would take us out on the ground and we'd, bowl in the nets to the players and stuff like that. So it was a bit surreal, I think, when you look back on it, but it was just, that was how it was. I didn't know it any different.
Yeah, I always find it funny chatting to either father, son, kids who have grown up around, elite athletes or, elite teams like the Aussie cricket team. And for everyone else, it's like, oh my God, like this is amazing. You were hanging out with Dennis Lilly, you're facing in the nets Dennis Lilly, and you're like, oh, yeah, some old guy, one of Dad's mates, like bowl it down, right? It's just normal for you.
Yeah, it is, and we still see him. And there's said that the great mates. I mean, a lot of those guys came to my wedding, for example, and then ended up, taking some of my mates out on the town afterwards. So it's just like part of growing up. It was, we're very lucky, and they're great people. They were then, they still are, and it's great that we can still keep in touch with them.
So you touched on, you work with Cricket Australia. Now that
Cricketers Association.
Sorry. I'll get employed by the wrong people.
By the AFL now.
Yeah, okay. You're now the CEO of the AFLPA.
Yeah.
You actually started at Port Adelaide.
I did. Yeah.
As head of.
I ended up sort of the head of the commercial department.
So you started in footy.
Started in footy. Yeah. It was. Before that, I was selling tennis rackets and golf clubs for a brand called Wilson. Got a job at Port Adelaide. Actually, one of the other guys Dad played with, Ian Brayshaw, who you obviously are very familiar with.
Yes.
Grew up with Mark Brayshaw, James Brayshaw, Robbie Brayshaw. So, and that family. And Mark actually got me employed at Port Adelaide. So there's a connection that goes a fair way back there. But yeah, I love my time at Port. I mean, it was working in an AFL club, particularly one that was just starting. So I started there in 1997 in their first year. It was bloody hard work. I mean, there was just non-stop, and the club had come from the sandful, and there was a real volunteer mentality. Like they expected everyone to care about as much about the place as what they did. But I loved it. We just learnt so much. There was so many challenges, and it was exciting watching a club start off, and they were pretty successful right from the start, Port. Like they nearly made the finals in their first year. And
I was going to say, they won grand finals early 2000s.
Yeah, haven't won one since, but they won one early. But yeah, they've been around the mark, and it's a club that expects to win, and that's the culture there. I thought was great. Learned a lot from my time there, and again made a lot of lifelong friends there.
Do you look back there? And now, your permanent work with AFL players.
Yep.
And, I've been in a footy club. I know that sometimes there's a segregation between maybe comms and marketing and commercial and membership and the actual playing group. Like, were you able to make relationships with players back then, and you look now and go, oh, I actually learned some stuff at Port that have come across to our role
definitely.
now.
I mean, there was definitely a segregation. I mean, at Port, the footy department was downstairs and the admin was upstairs, and we weren't allowed down there pretty much. I was really good mates with the strength and conditioning guy, and we used to have a group of us that would use the gym pre-work. Not that it paid much dividends for me, but we used to.
A lot of sledging going on the figures.
Yeah, that's all right, mate. Well, I'm not in great shape at the moment, but that was good because you get to know a few of the players. And back in those days, the players would tend to get out and about after a game a bit more than they probably do these days. So which I enjoy doing. So I built some good relationships there with a number of the players, and some of them I still see. And it's quite cool when you walk into a club now and you see Adam Kingsley's the coach at the Giants, or Brendan Lade, or Josh Carr. I saw him last week, and he was probably my all-time favourite Port player. And seeing that he's going to be the next Port coach was great. So there's lots of guys there that I knew, but I wouldn't say that I was close mates with, but knew and still know, which is good.
That is good. So you moved to cricket then.
Yeah, I just sort of got to a point. I mean, cricket's sort of been in my blood, and I had 4.5 years at Port, and I just decided I wanted to get a job in cricket. And there's a fellow called Tim May who played for Australia, who had set up the Australian Cricketers Association, so the Players Union.
Yep.
At that point, there was only him and one other person working there, and I just had a beer with him one day and said, look, I want to get into cricket. You got any advice for me? And he gave me a few people to talk to, and then a year later he rang me up and said, I've got a job, do you want it? And basically I thought, yeah, but that required me to move to Melbourne, which I did. it was great. I mean, it was such a small organisation that was punching above its weight, dealing with all the sorts of issues that we deal with. I don't think at that point we even had email or anything like that. It was a different time, but it was great to get into the thick of it. And because we were so small, I learnt the player association business across every angle really quickly.
Right.
I had great exposure to, a team at that point in the Australian team that was, the best maybe the world had ever seen. And they had pretty high expectations, as players tend to do. And so, we got started on some pretty big issues early, which just accelerated my understanding of, what the player association movement was about.
So was the scope, I guess, bigger than what you would have thought? One, because you had less resources, but two, it's an international sport. Like it's not just a domestic, game. Are you dealing with broad spectrum, basically everything?
Massively. And I think people would be surprised at, the breadth of the work the player association actually does. I mean, it's at the end of the day, your job is to try to keep advancing, the player's position in the game, and that, can be what they get paid. It can be what's happening in their workplace. It's around their well-being. It's around the game itself. And cricket's it's a much more complex game than football, in that you're dealing with the international component, and there's a lot of politics in cricket.
Yeah.
But you're dealing with issues. I spent a lot of my time there dealing with security type issues around, is it safe to tour Pakistan, other areas of the subcontinent? And we spent a lot of time in some, I did a lot of work in travelling around the world and seeing the places the players would need to go and play and making sure that they were actually safe to go and do so. So, yeah, it's as I said, it was there's a lot of stuff that was going on in cricket, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on in all sports.
So there's no politics in AFL?
There's plenty, but it's not as I think AFL has got a bit more control of its own destiny when you throw in the international elements of cricket. You're talking about even the schedule. There's so many moving parts to that, and really, you only make money if you're Australia, if you've got India or England turning up. Yet you've still got obligations everywhere else, and so there's a lot of moving pieces in cricket. Whereas AFL is a much simpler sport to run, not without its challenges, but I think that the politics are a little bit easier to navigate here.
Any favourite moments or stories in your time working with the Cricketers Association?
Oh, there are lots of good times. I mean, God,
like you would have oversaw, that when they win World Cups.
Yep.
Ashes wins.
Yep, all of that. I mean, the Australian team didn't lose too often, and still doesn't lose too often, but it didn't lose too often back in the day.
That all thanks to the Cricketers.
Yeah, of course. No, I mean, we had a pretty good team back then. But there were times, I remember the 2005 Ashes series when I'd literally just taken over as the CEO and they'd lost for the first time in a long time. So I was starting to wonder whether I had some role in that, but they bounced back pretty quickly. I mean, I think the lots of good times. Like one of the great parts about that job is a lot of camaraderie with the other player associations around the world. So I've got lifelong mates who still run the New Zealand Players Association in South Africa and England, and so we would catch up once or twice a year, and there'd always be some probably stories I don't want to tell, but there was lots of fun in those days. And the cricketers are probably able to have a little bit more fun than the AFL players do. It shocked me when I came to the AFLPA at just how responsible the AFL players were in terms of their what they were doing away from footy, and just how committed they were to their training. Cricketers were drinking beers during games, which I was all up for. So it was a different, but I still think it's that's part of the beauty of cricket is the camaraderie that comes from sitting in a change room and waiting to bat and just talking crap with your teammates for 6-7 hours a day and then going out at night. It's I think that's something that AFL could probably learn a little bit from.
No, I was going to ask you a serious question around that. It sounds like you and I are quite similar, enjoy having a beer with your mates. I could see a world in which at the end of a game, AFL players are having a beer in the change rooms. Now, sports scientists have got involved, and we've got dietitians, and we've got the list goes on of people saying not to do that. But me as a player, like I found out most successful sides would sit around and have a beer. And it wasn't to get, drunk. It was just to literally, I think men communicate better in certain circumstances like that. But you would never see, like, you wouldn't see Essendon and Carlton sitting there. Essendon and Hawthorn Friday night footy. All right, boys, let's go have a couple of beers afterwards. Not happening.
No, but I think there's merit in it. I honestly do. I mean, you got a carb load after a game day, and I think that it's, your career goes. I mean, how long was your career? You're
14 years.
14 years. I bet it went like that. It went like that. And I bet you look at it and go, I probably haven't got to build relationships with a whole lot of players around the competition who, let's face it, you're all probably pretty similar. And you probably could have made, 10 times as many mates through your time in AFL if you actually got to know them. It really did strike me when I came into this job at how, and it still does, there's no relationships across the clubs really unless you played juniors with, a particular player. And I find that unusual. In cricket, they would do that. We'd have our annual directors and delegates conference, and it would be we'd have a big night. The players would all end up in my room inevitably with a bathtub full of alcohol, and we'd mix and build relationships. And that's one of the beauties of sport. And as I said when I first started in this job, I was like, God, they don't know each other. They feel so restricted around what they can do, outside of, just outside of their sort of work obligations. And I just reckon that's a bit of a missing piece. I think it's got a little bit better, but I don't reckon it's where it could be. So I'd love to see that. I don't think there's much harm in it.
Well, West Coast and Freo are 20 minutes away, and I could count on one hand the amount of Freo players when I was a player I knew, let alone were mates with.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was mates with one Freo player, Barlow, and he was a pseudo Freo player, knew him from Victoria, right? So
it's weird, isn't it? It's weird because you can be competitors on the field, but what's wrong with actually being friends off the field?
Correct. So you're appointed AFLPA CEO mid 2014.
Yep.
And you walk basically into CBA negotiations?
Oh, we didn't. I mean, we started
further down the track.
That a little bit after 2017 was when we finalised that, but probably got into it around 2015. I thought you were going to say walked into the Essendon because that's what I did walk into at that time.
Right, the back end of that.
Well, it was probably 2/3 of the way through, I reckon. And obviously we'd got a really good outcome through the AFL's anti-doping tribunal. The players were all cleared, and that was, we were in the room when that was announced to them, and it was a great day. And then a year later, not such a great day when Wada came in over the top. So
right, so that was that period there.
Yeah, that was tough. It was really tough watching those players go through that. And I think for the first part of this job, we were at Essendon pretty much every week talking to the players, giving them updates, and there are a lot of moving pieces. And I'll never forget the day that they got delivered the bad news. And again, we delivered that to them, and, watching 30-odd grown men in tears was pretty hard. But it's a very issue-rich industry, this one. So there's lots of different issues that we've worked through in that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's obviously a big challenge. The negotiating element between AFLPA, AFL, broadcasters through 2017. Biggest challenges there?
Well, I think one of the things when the AFLPA sort of board approached me about the role was that they were sort of hell-bent on getting us to deliver a revenue share model, and that was a big talking point. I reckon you and I even had some chats about this at the time. There was a lack of belief that the PA could deliver that. I think the PA had tried to do it a couple of times, but that was really important, and we, pleased that we were able to deliver that in the 2017 deal. That was I think, and the really what's behind that is that the players are the ones that are driving the game's revenues, and they should get a share in it. They should be incentivised to keep driving it forward. And I think the players really bought into the principle behind that. But there was maybe a lack of belief that the PA was going to deliver that for them. And I think, the players, to their credit, really united through that period, and we got to a good outcome. Just to sort of, I guess, for the audience, so before that it was, all right, here's your money. Yeah. We give you $1 million. I know that's something. Yep. And that's it. Yeah. It changed in 2017 to say, all right, AFL is going to make this amount of money, and if it's a lot, AFL players get a percentage increase that is aligned with that. The principle was, and we were able to show the players to start off with, but then the AFL and the clubs, etc., that the players were negotiating in good faith based on the financial projections the AFL were giving us. And what was happening every year is what they told us their revenues were going to be ended up being quite a way short of what they were. And so from our perspective, the players were being shortchanged because we can't control the AFL's projections. In fact, they can't either. Like, the reality is that they are a guess. And our view was, well, you need to pay the players based on what you're actually generating, not what you tell us you're going to generate. Right. And that was the philosophy behind it. And in the end, we were able to achieve that.
I'm just jumping through moments through, and then I basically just want to hot fire questions, state of things, and just see what you think about them. I thought about, my time. So I was a delegate for a number of years.
Very good one too.
Because I used to challenge her. And I think, we used to like that, didn't you? Like, otherwise you're just sitting around doing nothing. So.
Yeah, you did.
Because, and I'll get that with the hot fire stuff. Western Australia always, and by location, not by attitude, is always put, to the other side of the country, basically. And that was my, vibe on it. But COVID, to me, strikes me as the most challenging period in your tenure. Yep. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. It was, I think for everyone, that was bloody challenging. And there was no playbook for that. That was, we were making that up day to day and reacting. And I think it was an incredible time. I actually look back really proudly on what we were able to do during that time. But there were a lot of pissed off players at that time because things weren't perfect. And for the Western Australian people, for example, you were living under different conditions to what we were living in over here. And, there were things that were out of our control, like the governments of the country weren't allowing people just to go in and out of their borders without, certain things being put in place. And so there were players that couldn't get their heads around that at times. And there were moving pieces every day, games having to move, and player would get COVID and that could potentially throw out a game. It was incredible how quickly everyone was able to get things done during that time.
I don't think before then we really – I remember like early – it would have been probably early in 2015 somewhere. This is well before COVID. We'd do an all-in meeting, and it was like this, technological breakthrough to get every player sort of, there was I remember being like some hotel like lobby like function centre trying to dial into the, general meeting or whatever. It was this logistical nightmare to get everyone. But COVID, like I remember being on a Zoom call with like 700 people.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
We did that more than once.
Yeah. I remember Jake Waterman was very prominent. I'm not sure.
I remember that vividly. In fact, just as a short story on that, I recently ticked over 10 years at the PA, and we had our annual leaders conference in January, and unbeknownst to me, they produced a video of my 10 years, and Patrick Dangerfield narrated it, and then Jake Waterman started popping up throughout the video, and so made me laugh. He's a good man, Jake, but that story was great. And there were lots of those moments during COVID where players, despite everything that was going on, still filled us with humour, and not much better than that particular story.
So, like, just for context, if you don't know what we're talking about here, we had 700 people on a call.
Yeah.
And someone did it. You could type your own name as you still had it.
Maybe, because this was a really serious call too. Like, we'd made a decision. The AFL was talking about putting you all in hubs in Queensland.
Yes.
And I had decided we were going to tell you that. And I knew you were going to all be pissed off. But the reality is we were going to tell the players that this is what they're planning, and then just deal with it. And, as you might recall, and I won't name any other names, but once I delivered that news, the playing group just blew up. Just blew up. And the chat function had just started coming down like something had malfunctioned. And I was trying to be calm, and then the question came through. No one had spoken at this point from the playing group.
No one had taken the mute off.
Hey, Marshy, it's Jake Waterman here. I was just wondering if we'll be able to play golf up in the hub. And then, and it was just.
And then the next one.
There. And the next one. I mean,
g'day, Marshy, Jake Waterman here again. You got to laugh now, right? Yeah. But like, it's great context from you. Like, it was a dead serious meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Like one of the biggest meetings probably ever.
Players were angry, and they were, understand. We knew they would be. And I know it was Hamish Brayshaw that did it, but to have broken it up like that, and that then became a thing. Like, we'd have meetings, with individual clubs, and it'd be like, "Hey, Marsh, it's Jake Waterman here," and it's just like
that is so funny.
Poor old Jake, but he's got a great sense of humour, and he's right. I heard him tell. I think he was telling you actually that he still gets you'd be on the field and someone will sledge him about it. So it was brilliant.
Yeah, Jake Waterman here. Very good. There was just so many challenges. I just think about that time as a player and you know, from your point of view, the challenges and players, hubs, playing conditions changing overnight, fixturing changing overnight, pay changing overnight, like all of that. So players are, I guess, copying the result, but you're probably more dealing with the process a little bit, like, or lack thereof, maybe.
Yeah, we were literally dealing with it every day. And I think and in bearing in mind in Melbourne, we were locked in our houses for most of it, but we were, you know, year one, we agreed to pay cuts at a time where, you know, we'd given and the players were all very supportive of this at the time when we did it. There was a real chance we weren't playing in 2020. Like, that looked very, very likely. To the credit of the industry, we were able to in the end, even though it was a shortened season. But the financial hit to the industry was massive. The players took a bit of that. But then in 2021, we renegotiated the deal and the players ended up getting more than they would have got under the CBA, which...
Unless they retired at the end of 2020.
Why'd you do that? But there was an element there of we'd actually struck a really good deal. I actually went up to Queensland for 5 weeks and travelled around and saw all the players and sort of put our plan to them. This is how we're going to get, you know, to the right outcome next year. And the players were really bought in and we got to a good outcome. And, to get through that time, and livelihoods were at stake. But the fact that the industry got through as well as it did and recovered pretty quickly after was a credit to everyone. The AFL, I thought Gil did a great job during that time. It wasn't easy. And there were lots of tough conversations. And, you know, every time we got you guys on a call, it was never good news. It was always like, this is what's happening next. But I think the players largely bought into it and, you know, we pulled through. There was always going to be some complaints and, you know, you saw plenty of that. But at the same time, I'm really proud of what we were able to do during that time.
Yeah, I was one of the complainants, if we were talking about that's all right, though.
That's why you retired.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so that's through COVID. What's the relationship like between the AFLPA, the AFL, and the players? Like, it's triangular, right? You represent the players to the AFL. AFL, you know, players are playing for the AFL.
Yep.
What's that relationship like? Like, is it, like you said, tough conversations? Is it, you know, is the AFLPA independent completely of AFL? Are you working collaboratively, all of that?
Yep. Well, we are independent, and I know that there's it comes up, and I think you may have even said it recently, that we're funded by the AFL. We're not. We're funded by the players. So the reality of it is the players now get a 31.7% share of the game's revenues, AFL and clubs, and the players pay us out of that. We are, because of that model, though, we like to think that we're in partnership with the AFL. Like, if the game grows, the players grow with it. And so you've always got one eye on trying to keep the game moving forward. But there's issues. There's issues all the time. We're dealing with half a dozen at the moment, and there's tension in the relationship. And that's fine. That's healthy in my view, that all we're trying to do here is keep pushing the game forward. But our interests are to make sure the players are well looked after. So there'll be times where there's more tension than others. But I think, you know, on the whole, it's a healthy relationship. Like, we all care about the game. We keep working together to try to push it forward. But sometimes we've got different views as to how to get there.
What's the biggest issue right now for the AFLPA that you're dealing with? I know that's...
Yeah, I mean, there's
lots.
There's lots. I mean, I think when you take a step back out of what we're dealing with today and actually go, what is the biggest issue? It's hard to go past probably concussion and mental health. I think they're the two that you look at and go, there's not easy fixes to those issues. We're doing a lot to help people that have been impacted by concussion. So in terms of the reactive piece, and I'm sure we'll talk about the past player fund, but there's some really significant support that's been put in place. Making the game as safe as it can possibly be in a contact sport and trying to limit the number of concussions going forward is going to be the challenge. And then there's still quite a bit of grey around what's the best way to deal with these things. Like, is the 12-day mandatory sit-out period, is that enough? Is it too much? There's all those sorts of things you need to work through. But I think that's the one that worries me the most, because I think we've seen, you know, we're seeing day to day, we're seeing examples of players who are most definitely suffering from concussions they received during footy. And I think mental health, and it's a little bit related, but I think we're seeing a significant proportion of our community that are dealing with these issues, and our players are under a lot of pressure and scrutiny, and that's only getting more and more with the media attention that's on the game. And I think we see a lot of players taking up our support services, trying to work with these things. So we're taking young men and women straight out of school in most cases and putting them in this pressure cooker environment where everything they do is scrutinised, whether that be on or off the field. And it's a lot for a young person to deal with.
I've got sort of different views around the mental health element. I personally don't think it's the scrutiny and the media attention. I mean, that's a part of what you sign up for, and you may not, as a 17-year-old, understand that, but it is certainly a part of the industry. Like, my thoughts on where the mental health struggles and element come from is actually the structure, the sense of belonging, the team, the purpose, that you just cannot find in regular life.
Yep.
Trying to win a premiership as a player for a job literally cannot be replicated. If you think about any industry in the entire of Australia, there's really not many that there's just such a singular focus that, success and failure is pretty much dictated by that, and you can very easily measure it. And you pull yourself out of that environment, and I can talk about myself. Like, you don't necessarily feel lost, but you lose a sense of purpose that is very hard to replicate. Rather than the scrutiny and the media attention and all of that, I think if you hate that, turn social media off. Don't pick up a paper. But
I think it's. Well, I don't disagree with anything you've just said there. I think they're all interlinked, though. I think there'll be players that will really struggle with the scrutiny. You maybe dealt with that better than a lot, but I do think that when players hit transition, and that's just not an AFL issue. That's an every sport issue. I don't know if any player transitions particularly well.
No, I'd agree with that.
And I think there's varying degrees of that, but I think this is, I've heard, I think it was Lauren Jackson talked about you die twice as an athlete, and there's an element of that, and it's difficult to replicate. I think those that do prepare for life after sport do it better, but it's still, probably the dream job, and depending on how long your career is, and the average career is 4 to 5 years, like you might have had your high point by the time you're 22, 23. It's when you think of it that way, even if you've got a long career and you get into your 30s, it's pretty hard to then go, well, is that it? Is that the high point of my life?
So the head knocks and the concussions and a little bit of the career-ending injury stuff.
Yeah.
That for me, looking externally in, looks like a bit of a minefield.
Yeah.
How much time is it? Are you putting into that as a players' association? And are we going to have answers to some of that? Like, I've got 2 teammates at career-ending, Brad Shepherd, Dan Venables, but it's not really about them specifically. There's a lot of guys now. I don't know. What are your thoughts on all that sits?
We're really concerned about it, and I think one of the really significant outcomes out of the last CBA we did, which was in 2023, is a expanded fund for our past players. So it's a $55 million fund over 5 years. There were a number of things that were already in place, so I might even just take you through them quickly. If you end the game with a career-ending injury, and that's really defined by you can't play football again, then there's a payout that will come with that. We have a total and permanent disability insurance policy that players. Insurance is tricky, but a number of players will get access to that. We have a retirement account that players get access to. We have ongoing support around medical expenses. We have a hardship fund, the mental health network they can tap into. We have superannuation, etc. So there's a lot of things that have been in place. One of the things that we're standing up as part of this new fund is what we're calling a serious injury benefit. So where a player, because of a football injury, can't work, then there's another significant benefit that will go there, and hopefully that'll help out some of those players that are really struggling. I think it's targeted at the particularly concussion, spinal, nerve type damage that comes from footy, and there's not heaps of them, but these are players that we look at and go, they need to be helped out, because if because of football they can't work again and therefore earn an income, we need to have something in place for them.
Is the AFL funding that?
Because that comes out of the players' share again.
So why are the players funding that? Why is the industry? Why is the Why is the AFL not doing that?
Yeah, is
that a fair question?
It's a fair question. I think, I guess in the end it was part of the negotiation. It allowed us to increase the percentage that the players actually get. So it's a negotiation.
Right.
But it's something that we feel strongly about. The AFL will be part of the administration of that with us. And I think it's something that we both feel very strongly about, is we need to protect the past players. And I think that'll only grow. It's probably just for any past players listening to, there's a lot now in place, and part of it is you actually reaching out and tapping into this fund, and we will provide this support no matter when your career finished. If you're a member of the PA, it's something that, if you've been suffering for a number of years and you can't work because of a head injury, for example, we're there to support you. We'll go through a process with you.
Like I've seen, there's some past player noise, and that sort of seems like there always is, in conjunction with the fifth quarter, which is Ken Hunter and Ken Sheldon, and that's sort of a bit of a thing that's murmuring a little bit, maybe bigger here than Western Australia, which is where we're from. I'll start with my reflections being a past player, and then you can talk about it yourself. But I use a psychologist once a week, and it's one of the most important things I do all week. And that's funded by the AFLPA.
Yep.
I told you before we interview, I'm not here to tell you how good you're going. You can do that for yourself. But, I think it's important. I do hear a lot of chat about past players and what's the AFLPA doing and what's the AFL doing. Like anything, and I was like this as a player, and it's a little bit about why I don't think the scrutiny and the media stuff, it's got to be down to you at a point. The AFLPA, the AFL, the industry can do whatever you like. And it's like AFL clubs. You can have 10 dietitians, you can have the best fitness staff in the world. In the end, you need to reach out yourself. So, yeah, psychologists, I use that. The retirement fund, the super, all of that. Like, that's all AFLPA. And I look back as someone who challenged you and the industry a lot. I'm pretty comfortable with where that sits, but there is some noise of others that aren't. So, where have what I just said, and where that general vibe is that about spot on?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are past players out there that are struggling, and we're trying to do something about that, and that's what this fund is about. As I said, we've carved out 55 million. What we've done with that is prioritise the areas that we think the past players need the most support, and there's a lot there now. But we're not going to cover it. We can't cover everything. So there'll be past players that will get well supported by us, but we'll always expect more, and we just have to accept that. So if the guys from the fifth quarter can add additional value, we're supportive of that. We've been meeting with them and talking with them. Our message is, don't put in place the things that we've already got in place, because it'll be a waste of your money. But if you can add value in other areas, do it. And I don't think we're ever going to have enough to fully support the past players and meet all the expectations, but we will keep building on it. And I think what's in place is really serving those that have been most disadvantaged through footy. And I know that we've helped out just over 1,100 past players over the last few years. So there are a lot that are tapping into what we do.
Yep, I'm one of them, and very much appreciated. Now, I'm going to quick fire some at you, if that's all right, Marshy.
Go for it.
F1's held you up a little bit, so I'm going to have to just run through these as quick as I can. I hope you're at another function or some sort of wine and dine.
I'm here with you now, mate.
All right. Let's start with this one. Drug policy.
Yeah, we're working through it at the moment.
I know these are all...
question?
Wow, yeah, it's a good... Yeah. Well, what's the AFLPA's stance on it?
Well, we support the illicit drug policy as long as it is about identifying players that are having problems with illicit drugs and helping them. That's always been the principle of our position on this. If it becomes something else, then we would be not supportive of it. And so that's the discussion we're having with the AFL at the moment. It's helped a lot of players out over the journey, and whilst it continues to do that, we think it's important for the reasons I touched on before. We take young kids out of school and we put them into an environment that in some respects is not real. And there's temptations there, and there are people that they mix with, and there's money and all that stuff that, we do have a responsibility to try to educate. And then, and part of education, I think, is a good part of education. Sometimes people make mistakes, but then what do you do with that? And what are the lessons that players can learn if they have, made a mistake? And I think the conversations that come and the counselling that comes is really important. So we believe in it, but it needs to be an identify and support policy.
All right. Fixture and competition inequality for even the back end of my career, it was a big focus of the AFL to make the competition more equal. Do you think we're doing a good enough job of that as an industry, especially for West Australian sides, which is my delegate hat on?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think what I might do is expand this out a little bit because we negotiated a review of competitive balance as part of this latest CBA, and we look at it. There's probably about 15 factors when you think about competitive balance. Fixtures part of it, but travel's part of it, and
revenue,
cost of living, and second tier competitions and all that sort of stuff. So our view, and the AFL is on board with where we're going here, is that we should look at each club across each of those 15 factors and work out where each club sits. So West Coast has got some structural advantages. It's probably got one of the best home ground advantages in the league. But on the flip side, it does more travel, so it's probably when it's playing away,
biggest away ground disadvantage in the league.
Yeah. And then the travel bit is indisputable. The Western Australian teams are travelling probably 3 times as many kilometres every year as anyone else. The Victorian clubs are. So you factor all of these things in. West Coast has got more money than pretty much the rest of the competition combined. So there's an element of you put it all together and then work out where the clubs are at in a net sense. Are they advantaged? Are they disadvantaged? And then I think you make some decisions around how do you try to equal it up. The clubs are very good at telling you where they're disadvantaged. They're not that good at telling you where they're advantaged. And our view is that you need to look at it in totality because it's not possible. We can't do anything about the travel bit. Western Australian teams are going to travel more than the Victorian teams are.
We could.
Well,
you could schedule different Melbourne clubs outside of Melbourne.
Yeah, you could. I think the reality is that's probably not going to happen. But maybe a better example would be with the Western Bulldogs are probably never going to have as much money as West Coast. So rather than trying to fix that problem, how do you compensate them in another way to try to fix it? And I think that's where we're headed, getting the AFL are on board with what we're trying to do here. And I think competitive balance is one of the most important factors in the whole competition for them, for us, for everyone. And, when you think about how players get allocated, most of you get drafted to a club. You have no choice where you go. It's hard to move because of, free agency doesn't kick in until 8 years. We think it's really important that each club has an equal chance of success.
Do you want, does the AFLPA and players want more movement or less movement free agency? Are we that far away from just being able to just move when you feel like it? It feels like we've got that many periods.
Yeah.
We've got draft, we've got trade period, we've got SSP, then we've got mid-season, then we've got post-season. There's about 8 weeks in the year you can't get moved. So how far away from you just doing what you feel like? And what's your position on it?
Well, I might start with the position. I mean, I'm a big believer in sort of letting the market work it out, and I think that if players want to try to move clubs, that's good. The AFL's been difficult to move on free agency. I think what we are seeing is players are, in a lot of cases, getting to where they want to get to outside of free agency, and so we think it's in a pretty good place. We would love to see players playing where they want to, but it's also a good thing that clubs will do what they can to keep their players at their club. And so I think giving them the financial means and otherwise to do that is a good thing. We do want the competition to be as equal as possible because that means it's going to be in the healthiest shape and we will benefit from that.
Yeah, increased movement to me lends itself to more inequality. The best clubs, we've seen it with Finn Callahan a little bit. Yep. He thinks he's got a big opportunity to win a premiership at GWS, and whether St Kilda stuff's true or not. And he goes, I'll park the money and I'll stay here for a flag. So if you got teams that are more likely to win a flag, more likely to retain players, more likely to attract players, does that create a situation where the clubs that aren't going so well find it more difficult to get players to their football club?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing with free agency is the sort of the bigger free agents tend to go to the bigger clubs at the moment. And so that is something that we're factoring into this review is to go, okay, if that's our assumption, then how do we compensate the clubs at the other end? But, there are other ways for clubs at the other end. I think we've seen it in recent times to move up the ladder, and then all of a sudden they do become attractive for potential free agents. So, yeah, I mean, I'd love to see players getting to where they want to play, but I'd also love to see that every club has an ability to be at the top of the ladder, so players may choose any club at any given time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Should we release players' pay? Should people know what players are on?
Oh, look, the players' view of this is a strong no, and I think, and I might explain sort of why.
Yeah.
I think it goes back a little bit to the media scrutiny piece, and you can see what will happen. There's probably some in the media that will make a big thing of this on a weekly basis, where it's player X is getting paid $1 million and turned the ball over 3 times, and all of a sudden he's a disgrace and he shouldn't be getting paid that. So I think that's what the players are worried about.
Should he? And like that's not it's not a good example, but like if you miss one ground ball, like who cares? But if it's a prolonged 4 to 6 week period where a player's on $1 million and they're in the bottom 5 players on the list, well, shouldn't the scrutiny come?
Well, the scrutiny is probably going to come anyway, just without the the added narrative of what the player's getting paid. And so I think there's that, but there is a flip side to this, and that is, you have a look at sports around the world where they do release the salaries. The impact of that has been driving up the salary cap. So that's once players, in my experience across a couple of sports, are sometimes it's not what you're getting paid, it's what someone else is getting paid, and therefore I should be getting that as well. And I think that would become that would increase the tension in the marketplace. If you're looking at someone the equivalent to you who's getting paid twice as much as you, then you're going to be pushing your agent to go a bit harder for you, and it'll put pressure on the cap. And so there's some benefit to it from a player's perspective. And, I've spoken to players about the two parts of it. At the moment, their view is we just don't need the added scrutiny of it, which I respect.
Fair enough. Players' time off and time spent at club and all of that. Again, this is stemmed probably from the back end of my career. It was a big push on players. We need more time off, need more time for study, more time for where we are right now. What's the AFLPA's position on? Are we happy with the time players are at clubs and the time away from clubs? Because, I look back on my career and there was times where I was training in, definitely October.
Yep.
In poor sides for West Coast. And so there's like a 3-month training block, and then you get like 5 days off for Chrissy, and then you're back, and it's a 5-month pre-season. Now that's too long.
Yeah.
But I look now and I know some of the guys at West Coast who are one of the worst sides in the competition, and they've got 10 days before Christmas, and then they're off for 3 weeks, and then it's January, and then people get injured. So have we gone too far the other way?
I don't think so, but I think what we'll be led by here is the data, and I think what we've seen over the last period of time is we're not seeing an increase in injuries.
Is that right?
And in fact, if you look at injuries in two lenses, one is how many players are getting injured, and then the total number of games players are missing. There's actually been a reduction in the total number of games over the last few years that players have missed. So it does feel this year as though we've seen a few more injuries at the start of the year. And I'd probably say a couple of things here. One is we always see more injuries at the start of the year. And so we need to look at this at the end of the season. And I think when you're looking at injury data, that is the key point. How many, what was the sort of cumulative impact? Because you train for pre-season to get ready for the whole season. And I think we're jumping to a point right now going, well, there's all these players are injured, therefore they didn't have enough pre-season. Well, let's see. Because you talk to players from, you use West Coast. You talk to players from teams that missed the finals last year, and they were saying to us, we're ready to go mid-February. Like they're saying, we can't get any fitter than we are right now.
What are the clubs saying? I know the players will say that.
Oh, there's definitely some clubs who would like more time, and there's some clubs who don't think it's an issue. And so it's mixed on that front. I think one thing that's getting overlooked in this discussion at the moment, though, is also the impact of opening round and gather round, which has effectively brought the season 2 weeks forward. So if we're going to have a debate about this, then they need to be in the mix here, because you take them out and there's 2 more weeks of pre-season for everyone. And so from our perspective, this was introduced really jointly between us and the AFL. It was about players getting a proper mental break away from the club. And as you know, like leave doesn't mean leave for an AFL footballer. You're training pretty much every day after a couple of weeks off. And so it's just getting away from the environment. And, there were times back in the day where clubs were putting GPS monitors on players during their holiday period and stuff like that, which is way, way beyond.
I'll tell you a way to get around that. Ash Sampy found out a good way. He put it on his dog in the sand dunes one day. And the boys couldn't believe. Ash, athleticism was his strength, probably not his fitness at times. And he came back and he wasn't looking overly fit, but his GPS was through the roof and he chucked it on his dog in the sand dunes. So maybe more players should have thought about that. Sorry to rush you through here, Marsh, but I want to get through another couple. The women's game, AFLW.
Yep.
It's been I would say like a rapid journey.
Yep.
And so where do you see that game now and what the future holds? And
yeah, I think it's in a pretty good place. I mean, I think the standard of football last season was the best it's been. I think we're seeing the players are getting more and more skilled, athletic. The investment obviously has increased significantly in recent times, but still think there's a bit more belief required, from the AFL, the clubs in AFLW. I think we would love to see them taking some more risk with respect to, we got a crossover between the men's and the women's season coming up this year. Let's play some double headers at the best venues and let's actually see how they go. I think where we've seen the W games at, Marvel, for example, the standard's been better. So our view is that they need to take, a bit more investment in putting the games on the main venues, trialling a few more things. We want to see some growth in games because it's in everyone's interest for W to start generating more and more interest and more revenue so that everyone can share in that.
Is that what is generating more revenue? I mean, there's probably lots of factors, but is that a major factor of holding the game back from having everyone paid full-time,
it is.
Season longer?
I'd put it to you this way. I mean, if we were to go to the AFL and say, let's play another 5 rounds of the men's competition, the dollar signs would start spinning in their eyes. Like they look at that and go, we can all do better here, right? So when you've got a product that everyone's watching, of course, that's what you're going to do. At the moment, we're having a fight with the AFL about growing the number of AFLW games. We want more. The AFL don't want more. And so, the answer to that is more people being interested in it. And, our view is you've got to market it, you've got to get it on the right venues at the right times and actually give the people a chance. And the thing that AFL's got that not all the sports do is we've got these massive supporter bases for our clubs. And so, to me, I'm a Port Adelaide supporter. Maybe shouldn't declare that, but
I'm GWS man.
But I barrack for both teams, and so you convert your existing supporter base to follow the women's team, and your growth can be exponential. So that's what we think needs to happen here. Keep looking for new fans and all that, no worries, but don't forget your existing fans and get them to come and engage in what is becoming a really good product.
Patrick Dangerfield, the president of the AFLPA. Playing over West, I never had an intimate relationship with Danger, and I mean, no, correct, but I mean, didn't know him that well, right? But when he speaks, people listen. He's the president. He's recently had views on the length of games, length of season. Maybe I'm not putting words in his mouth. Does that represent the entire cohort, or is that just Danger's views, or a bit of both?
I'm going to say a couple of things here. I think he's been the president of the PA now for 6 or 7 years. It's a bloody hard job to combine everything that you're doing with also being the figurehead of the playing group, and he's done it incredibly well. I think I've worked with a lot of player leaders across 2 sports, and it is not easy because no matter when you speak, you're going to be, particularly if it suits the narrative, you're going to be the AFLPA president. So I just want to say that because I think he's done an incredible job for the playing group. He's been strong where he's needed to be. He couldn't be more supportive of me personally and the people that work at the PA.
I agree.
So I couldn't have more respect for him. He, on this particular issue, that's most definitely his view. It's not necessarily every player's view, but there's no issue that every player agrees with. So he's got views on it. I think his big view is that the game, when you think about it from a broadcast perspective, from start to finish is too long. And I think most people would agree with that. It's getting harder in a society that's consuming things in shorter bites, that it's 3 hours is a long time now for an AFL, for the whole AFL. So I think there's an element of going, is there a way to cut back on that so that it's a bit more consumable and we don't lose people? You know, I watch my own kids who are 20 and 14 and they can't sit down and watch a whole game of footy. They'll be in and out and they're distracted by everything else. So that's where he's going with it. But I think he's got a right to express his views, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's always the AFLPA's, but I think on most occasions he's certainly aligned with the things that we're talking about.
Yeah, because the broadcast element and people going to games and watching it is one, but also there's the playing element as well. And I think I'd have a view similar to some, don't know most, but like I used to thrive and love how long the games were.
Yeah,
because that's where you really won and lost, is 25 minutes in the third quarter and you're to take a ground ball and you're too tired to do it.
Yeah,
and you haven't put the work in the pre-season. You fumble the ball, and it's a goal.
Yep.
Or alternatively, you have 10 years of playing at the level, you can do it under that sort of pressure. And like, I think if you make it too short, if you make players too fresh, and I think there's a danger of losing that element, which is like highly unique to the AFL.
Yeah,
I think, like the length of games is actually unique and a good thing.
Yeah, and I think this issue, and we've spoken to the players about it, we're seeing them at the moment, and there's definitely two views on this. There's that view, and I think it comes back a little bit to the individual player and their strengths, and you're obviously a really fit athlete.
No, not necessarily. I just used to think I was like, maybe mentally stronger at that time,
Okay, but again, it's to my point, I think you looked at it as something that you had an advantage with, and there'll be players who look at it, and maybe this speaks to where Danger's at, who look at it and go, this is not my strength. And so there's a bit of self-interest in that. And
35-year-old, however old Danger is.
Yeah, I think he'd have a lot of support from these from his age demographic in the competition.
Yeah. That's good. Hey, Dan, can you just hang on to this for me? So, it's ringing right now. Can you just let me know how long I've got? It's probably about a minute, and then we can wrap this up. Opening round, we've just gone through it. Is that got a future or not?
The Northern clubs love it. Like we were just up in Sydney a couple of weeks ago talking to Tom Harley, the CEO at the Swans, and he said it's really important to us.
Yes.
So you got to listen to that. But to my point earlier, if we're going to have a debate around the length of the pre-season, then that needs to be in the mix. From our perspective, it doesn't benefit enough players. It's quite disruptive in some fronts that we could easily live without it. Sort of questioning, it was supposed to be to combat the NRL going to Las Vegas, but now they go a week before, and
yes,
it doesn't make as much sense to us maybe as what it did, but not against the concept of it, given the benefits to the Northern clubs. Just sort of look at the bigger picture and go, is it actually worthwhile?
Was it haphazardly put together? Like I keep talking about this. I've actually been, for some reason, supporting opening round. Everyone's hating it, and I'm just like, I'm happy footy's back. I don't really care.
Yeah.
But I remember when it was brought about, like, it felt like there was no opening round, and then like 2 weeks before the season, there's this. Like, am I right in saying that? I
can't remember the time. I mean, I remember Andrew Dillon calling me on it and saying we want to do this, and the clubs are on board, and we spoke to the players of the clubs, and it was like, yeah, whatever. It was reasonably close. I couldn't give you the right time frame.
Right.
I think there's an element here of like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't sometimes. Like, if you see an opportunity, take it. Like, we've got to continue to grow as an industry, and if there's an opportunity to do that, take it, as long as you've worked through all the different sort of considerations. So I would never be critical for taking an opportunity. I don't have a problem with changing things during a season if they're not working. It's stupid to keep doing things if they aren't working. So I'm not critical on that front, but you've also then on the flip side, if it's not working, you got to go, well, okay, we tried that and it didn't work, like AFLX.
With mate, not the Zuba Duper goals. Don't forget, mate, Zuba Duper goals, one of the great inventions of all time. I want more Zuba goals. Got 3 minutes left, so I've got one more question, and then I got one final one. Last question. I've got lots more to ask, but I'm going to stay with this. We're going to get a 20th team in the AFL, and why is it going to be in the southwest of Western Australia?
Hadn't thought about that. I think there probably will be a 20th team at some point, and I think it'd be great to see which parts of the country sort of bid for it. Again, I'm all for growth, so I think that's something that we should be looking for. And
more players.
Which part of South
Bunbury, Busso, Dunsborough, Motor, anywhere there.
Parts of the world.
Yeah, correct. There was
Tracked all the surfies.
I was going to say, the entire playing group would be surfers and wine drinkers. Mate, it's been brilliant chatting to you.
Great for me too.
Appreciate your time. It'd be good to do it again sometime.
Yeah, sure. Anytime.
We're going to be back here in Melbourne a little bit. Got to finish off with this one. So we start with greatest sporting achievements and social media, which is a big part of our show where the people get to ask you the questions.
Righto.
The Eggman says, how does Paul Marsh like his eggs?
Well, this is a really boring answer. I've stopped eating eggs. Yeah, so I like them. I don't like them, Eggman, so there you go.
The first man who says I don't eat eggs and I like it, that's why I asked it. Mate, appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. If you want to follow us over on BackChat, Marshy, you can give us a follow, BackChat _.
I think I already do.
Good. And we're going to say a big thank you to our supporters, our sponsors, Paywise, powering the podcast in 2025, ID Athletic, Whippersnapper Whisky, Mamba Digital, TABtouch, Shelter Brewing Co, Leadable Precinct, On One Plumbing and Electrical, Camera Electronic. Everyone's supporting us. Yes, Marsh, you can hire me in commercial whenever you'd like. BackChatPodcast.com.au is where you get all that. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Schoey. It was great.